There's your Zoom again.
And then at home we have like
That.
That would be nice for,
yeah.
honestly, my husband.
was like, you never tell me.
Yeah. I wanted to share Google Calendars with him, but he doesn't want to work. So I was kind of like, well.
And daycare has like everyone's able to do like a dress up there. Like,
Oh, so you put that on there?
yeah, because the one time I forgot. Everyone had this. How did that so sad? Terrible mom.
I'm still scarred. One year, my mom, I say my mom, but I was in 6th grade, so I was old enough, but we forgot picture day. And I just had on like a t-shirt and stuff, and I'm still scarred from that moment. Like,
I scared my daughter already.
yeah.
Everyone else got to bring it down.
There's a Jiffy Boxer. Check it out. It's downtown. Have you seen the 4-year-old hockey player mic'd up?
No.
Oh my God, it's adorable. Just talking to himself the whole time during practice.
Oh, really? Oh, that's really cute.
I'm gonna take a little nap.
I'm supposed to have jury duty on Monday.
Oh, yeah, that is the okay.
Yeah, I just got a text saying the court settled, and I was like, oh, thank God.
I had to be at the jury.
I don't know how I haven't been called up for jury. I voted
think
since I've
we
been
are
18.
set.
You were actually
And so
on
this,
it?
Yeah.
that's
I
going
would
there.
actually love it if it was during summer, but I don't want
You've
to.
been Criminal Minds and like,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
love
We
it.
got our guilty.
How long did it take?
Oh, I see.
Well, forever, because we had one lady.
Yeah, that's always how it is.
I'll do
Like,
those.
And it's seriously like it took us like an hour.
Yeah.
We wasted so much taxpayer money.
Okay, technology wonders. I think we're ready to roll. So the other big topic for this week is around actual continuous improvement. This morning we talked about vision and how that leads continuous improvement. Today is actual continuous improvement, and I'm going to be sharing with you resources that are available at the state to help a school and a district to do a thorough continuous improvement process. If you, for example, special education, most grants that are written, Title I, if you're school-wide or targeted, you are required to do a comprehensive needs assessment. And I will tell you my role at the state, especially for identified schools and districts for IDEA and ESSA, is to review plans. We do not require that they use the DPI templates and such, but we're noticing that schools and districts that do it on their own are really missing the mark. So just kind of keep that in mind. As I'm going through this, maybe I'm not saying you need to use it, but maybe thinking about your continuous improvement process within your district and the needs assessment process in your district, where does it align and where does it maybe need a little more? So objectives today are really to develop an inquiry mindset. When you're doing a needs assessment, it's really about inquiry and digging deeper and learning about your data. To understand the tools and resources that are available through DPI, also understand data literacy, the importance of a data culture guiding school making and or decision making, which, you know, I heard it many times today. You're one person as a principal. When you think about a data culture, is how do you ensure that data and your vision really guide what occurs at your school? And then to develop your capacity to lead a school data retreat or data day, whatever your district calls it. And so, and then to lead ongoing continuous improvement. So the way I've set this up today, I actually do have a school's data that I scrubbed their name off of it because of data privacy, but most of the data that I have is from Wise Public. So, and a little bit that I made up because I can't get that from the school. So we are going to, in this activity, pretend that we are a school leadership team digging into our data. So, so here are a number of different resources for you to use. We're going to dig into the continuous improvement process, criteria, and rubric. It was created with many stakeholders across the state. It wasn't just people at DPI saying this is what continuous improvement is. We also worked with Carnegie, who are leaders in continuous improvement, to create it. We worked with the RTI Center, CISAs. At DPI, we also have folks working around with National Implementation Science Network. So they also, their focus on implementation is within this, because what has been found is a lot of schools can dig into the data, but when it comes to actually implementing their plan, only 17% of schools actually implement their plan. So really thinking about it through an implementation lens, so it doesn't become, and I can say just even from my experience, I was part of Data Digs. We created a great plan and it was on the shelf, and we never came back to it until the next summer when we did a Data Dig, and it's like, I wonder why changes haven't occurred. So ensuring that it really happens. Wise-Public is a great resource. If you have not been there, there's all sorts of data that you can get to. There are some new and interesting reports that are requirements under Every Student Succeeds Act, and one of those is by building, what is the per pupil funding? And as a principal, that might be something that you want to attend to, and know that it's on the public site. So parents may come to you and say, Ashley, why do the kids here not get as much money as the other kids in so-and-so school district across town? You know, so it's good to know the whys behind the data. And it's a good conversation for actually a whole leadership team to have, just not you as a principal. But then also knowing how to communicate that with parents, because you don't want to make, you know, school over here, their funding is this, and school over here is much less. You don't want to take from this school for this school, because there might be a reason. And if you take from this school, you know, most schools, 85% of their budget is staffing. So if you take staff members from this school and put them here, there's not only the cultural issues that it's going to cause, but you may have kids here not being served. So really understanding why the funds are there. Then there's also Wise Dash for districts. Do any of you have access to Wise Dash for districts? You have, okay. So within Wise Dash for districts is the data inquiry journal, which we will be using as a team for continuous improvement today. There's also a Wise Learn continuous improvement group that is available for you with resources to help teams around certain aspects of continuous improvement. At DPI, we have worked to ensure that each CISA has somebody who is very well versed in continuous improvement and using the tools. So they are always a resource that you could either have them come to your district or go to a CISA. And then also we have a partnership with, and they run a data leadership academy that will take you through the continuous improvement process with your team. And it's a whole year activity to do that. So those are just some resources that are available. Questions on that at all? So right now, if you could, we're going to have about 5 minutes. I'd like you to click on the link for the continuous improvement process criteria and rubric. And just review it on your own and think about what did you notice? What surprised you? How is it similar or different than the continuous improvement process used in your district? Just thank you. Should I say yes?
That's a baby.
Yeah.
We're starting to be young in class. Pat says, I told him, yes, please, says Wendy, who's presenting to Sandy, who's typing. And he said,
30 seconds. Okay, so what did you notice? A lot of information and picked a few pages, took quite a few pages to go through. What did you notice about the rubric?
About the rubric?
Or just about the criterion rubric, the document?
I've seen or heard that language of, act, plan, do, study in other contexts as well, outside of this, like in our teaching practices too. What's that?
I wonder if that's through a continuous improvement process. Because if the Plan, Do, Study, Act or PSA is common across continuous improvement. So it makes me think, when you say you hear it other places,
Yeah.
Are they using, in the Study Act cycle, are they using the data to adjust next steps?
Right, like I think it's like even in your PLC meetings,
Most definitely. Yeah, most PLCs, if you think about the foundation, is creating that grade level or PLC goals. So it makes sense that it would be within a PLC meeting.
I can see where any school district would be pretty easy to identify where you are in each of those areas and categories, and there's just a lot of information there that I think would help with your planning and follow up and there's a lot of information there that would help.
So the rubric is intended to get an understanding.
Get an understanding of where you are, where accomplished is kind of the goal place to be. The exemplary would be even better, but the thought that every school or district should focus on trying to be accomplished, just like with EE,
Right.
on focusing where to be.
Jordan, I think it's something.
Yeah, I guess so this gets created, so to receive funds, this needs to be created, title funds for a school?
So all schools or schools that qualify get title funds, because not every school in Wisconsin gets title funds, or every district in Wisconsin. But every school that receives title funds either has to create a targeted assistance plan that is based on a comprehensive needs assessment or a school-wide plan that's based on a needs assessment.
So like Northwoods is an all-school title school, and my school improvement plan is that's the plan. The one that I share, yeah.
There's
that rubric against that plan.
So that is not everything that's on a school
Right, that's
plan,
true.
no. That is one
piece.
One of the requirements of having a school-wide plan is completing a comprehensive needs assessment and putting in place an action plan. Makes 100% sense to combine them, because to do them separately, a school, you could have an IDEA plan, you could have a school-wide plan. If you're identified under ESSA, you could have a targeted assistance, or so you could have so many plans that the capacity is not there to implement it well. So it makes 100% sense that it's one plan.
So in a large district, then you would have let's just say elementary school. Who is overseeing and holding the principals accountable?
It should be the ESEA coordinator.
So Michael Hudson. But not every school is a title
Right,
school.
yeah. no, I know
Yeah.
that.
And so one of the requirements, that school improvement plan has to be on our website. That's just the last couple of years because of, that.
your school-wide plan should be on there,
Right.
more than just your school improvement plan.
It isn't just the school. But anyway,
How come only title schools have to do this?
All schools should do them.
Yeah.
They're just areas that they are required under
Like
federal
extra
law.
funding.
it's linked to the funding.
Yeah.
And I mean, it might be an ignorance, but from my experiences, like they're brought up, and I kind of talked about some introduction, they're created, they're sent out to the district office.
School improvement plans?
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a whole lot of revisiting throughout the year.
Well, you saw how the teams at Northwoods are, revisited. They're totally tied to that. And in those teams, we review that goal. So it might be more disaggregated. But I've shared, you're not at my step meetings, but I've shared the school improvement plan and at the beginning of the year and the end of the year as a whole as well. But that's one of the questions on the climate survey, and Northwoods happens to do really well on that. So I'm not sure if that's true everywhere.
But that's exactly what I said, that NERN sees that only 70% of schools that do this hard work actually put their plan in place. So it really takes determination. Like as a principal, I had a leadership team that we met once a month to look at the action steps, whoever was responsible for a step, how did it go and how do you know? So it was bringing data to say, we did this professional development. Here's what the feedback on the professional development was. But this was also our walkthrough data where we're seeing, is it really being put in place? So,
yeah.
Who typically pulls the data for these? Is it off that other link you showed on the previous slide?
we're gonna go
Okay.
into that. Great question.
So I think I did also something I saw on there is like, who's supposed to be a part of those teams?
Yeah, I
So-
thought that's interesting.
So
Yeah.
ESSA does have a requirement on who is on your
Yeah.
team. So if you are, and that's really only for identified districts, but when you look at that list, I really feel like it's best practice.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, as a building principal, I had parents on my team. I was an elementary principal, so I did not have students on my team. But as a district administrator, I had parents on my team that were representative of the district. And we did have the high school board rep was also on our team. Other questions?
How do you choose that
How do you treat
parent?
some know,
Yeah.
and some you just have to put in all call out,
So in La Crosse, our district has a district-wide parent team that has one rep or at least one from every school. And they use that team as their,
Okay.
way they do that. But I'll be honest, I don't think that the parents have a lot of voice. It's more of a information,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because, yeah.
which is more common than not. And Wendy and I've talked about this. So when she's reviewing plans for DPI, that's an area we need to get close. It's hard because parents may have a special interest or they may see
Yes.
things from one lens or
Yes.
whatever. So it's
Yes.
tricky.
Yeah, so that's a question,
So-
how do you pick?
so, yeah, and
What is it?
And often, the student group, the parents that are from the student groups that really are, the gaps are at, aren't the ones that
Yeah.
volunteer.
Yeah.
So that's why I said sometimes it's like
Yeah.
some personal connections with,
My daughter got chosen in her community because she was one of those that calls the school all the time when something's going wrong or whatever. And she's like, Mom, they asked me to be on this committee. And I'm like, well, because you're kind of a squeaky wheel, So I guess if they run things past you, they're going to get some feedback,
Yeah.
But just had to giggle.
yeah, even under ESSA, and this is something that I think is a complete flaw in the law, is that teams, so you're required to do your root cause analysis or your needs assessment with a root cause analysis and select your evidence-based improvement strategy, which is very specific. What are you going to implement? And it has to have one of the 3 tiers of evidence behind it, which are some pretty heavy evidence requirements. And then that's when you bring the parents in to help you improvement plan. And I feel like if they're missing all that front matter, how do you bring them in just to do a plan? That doesn't make sense to me. So even when I've worked with the school districts that I support, it's like, bring them in all along. Otherwise, they're gonna have no idea how you got here, and you're gonna have to slow down the work to show them how you got here, you know, and we know in schools, time is of the essence. So it's better to have them along the entire time. But it's hard because, you know, sometimes they see your works as a school.
In a small district, you kind of know who your advocates are, or who's going to be able to make the time and be effective and have some good input. But I would guess for a larger district, that would be.
I would say I support the two largest districts in the state, and they both have multiple identifications. They both really struggle getting families engaged in this work. But continuous improvement, even though we're talking about the requirements by the law for IDEA and under Title I, and actually Title II as a needs assessment, Title III as a needs assessment, you know, besides the legal requirements, continuous improvement is really what we're always doing. I mean, think about in your classroom, you're always reflecting, what could I do better? You know, you're looking at your student data, say, ooh, what do I need to bring back and change? So it's always an ongoing cycle.
Go ahead.
I just feel like with teacher turnover and with certain people always being on building leadership teams, there's a few stakeholders that make decisions. And then if there's a check-in, like on the school improvement plan, it's always the same. So like, let's just say a school improvement plan, they give like a color code of like green's good, yellow is like something we need to work on, and red's like we haven't even addressed it yet. With the hustle and bustle, this is supposed to be like the macro of what we're working towards. If there's only a few people that are just like, it's something they show up for once a month and then they report in on it, like, can I just use it as a description?
Yeah.
Has this been started? Our group was unsure of its existence. Would like to see a concrete list of these protocols / interventions / support. Staff want more information on student behaviors and what to do, not just follow up from the PSD or homeroom teacher. So this gets sent out, all staff see it, but not everyone has a full understanding of it. I don't know.
So that you mean, so you're talking like it's kind of a check off the box instead of active. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah. On the other hand,
I think
it's hard to get staff engaged sometimes too. Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. They should be, and it should be what the main work is about. But sometimes they see this as not really my problem.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like it's more of a this isn't. I'm on the team, but this isn't my duty. This is the principal's job. That's why my question was, who's holding this accountable actually?
So I can just share in my principal when I was in the role. I had my leadership team that I did the data retreat, but then one staff meeting a month. The rest of the staff was actually the team that we met. So this team met on PBIS, this team met on literacy, this team did math. Those were always our 3 goals. And they did the work around it. And before we left, they did a report out here. And they were always so creative. They had storylines and such, but they would report out and then allow time for questions. So that's the way I did it. So it was living and breathing, that it wasn't just the leadership team. During the one staff meeting a month though, the people that were on the leadership team kind of led the conversations. It wasn't me leading the conversation because I couldn't do it all. So they led the conversations on, okay, here's where we are. This is what our data says. What do you see? What should we do? Is it working? Those conversations. What do we do
So,
next?
yeah, how do you motivate on a 3:30 on a Wednesday after all the hustle and bustle? Like, okay, now let's whip out this data. And,
so our meetings were mornings. because our school didn't start till 8:30, so our meetings were 7:30 to 8:15.
I mean, it all comes back to that vision and buy-in, right? Like,
Right, yeah. But before our plans went to the board though, the entire staff got to see it all, to say,
Well, that's like
can we do this? Can I live with it? Or, you know, so.
So that's like I was saying with my personal vision, and even, no matter how much you talk about it, though, people are still individuals, and they're going to have their own personal things that are important to them, like what I do in my classroom tomorrow, or that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So how do you build that? How do you celebrate those? Back to celebration, back to training, back to that's all you can do. But I hear what you're saying. There's certainly a lot of room for improvement, and I think perhaps the bigger the district or the bigger the building, like at a high school or whatever, it's even harder.
Right.
Right.
And I do know also from my principal world that this was the work that we did. It wasn't, oh, this is a flavor of the month, now we're going to work on this. It was commitment to what we said our evidence-based improvement strategy was. Because again, not to overwhelm people, because they're completely busy and student behaviors and their own personal life, everything's tugging at teachers so much that it was my commitment. These are the 3 things we're working on. We're doing nothing else.
Yeah, exactly.
So say when you just do it part by part, or you look at the whole improvement plan when you bring it to the forefront?
I bring it to in the beginning and middle of the year. I bring the whole thing, and then the individual teams are responsible for their own goal. So it's seen at the beginning, middle, and end for everybody at a stand-up meeting usually, and then But do people even remember it?
That's what I'm
Sometimes people have seen it and they don't even remember seeing it because it's checked out a little bit. It's tough.
Well, I too see, like, even kind of like the position that I'm in, it's easy to complain or say,
Right, that's a big.
it's easy to complain as those teachers like, oh, it's not brought up, the communication is poor, this isn't going, and it's like, but you're not invested in seeking that out either. You know what I mean? Like, the communication is happening. We are bringing it up. We are talking about it. You're not invested in it.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't feel that person, like, you could be on that team. Why didn't you reach out to your principal and ask, can I be on that improvement team?
Well, and actually, frankly, sometimes people feel like it's a waste of time to bring it up. Like, oh, can't we be why are we here? I want to get my classroom.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what I hear as a teacher along with my colleagues, but then trying to have that habit.
Yeah.
I think this would be the most important thing we're doing
I'll switch.
as school leaders.
I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
This
Isn't
should
it
be
mine?
your
Oh,
driver.
I mean, this is
Oh,
our
I'm
vision
sorry.
for where we're going to be in 3 years, and if it's not on the discussion board or constantly being reviewed, we're going to leave in 3 years. Like, well, why didn't I ever this?
Yeah, right.
Understand that completely.
One just last thing is the superintendent search, though. I was talking to some people who were on the teacher panel that kind of asked, one of the things is, how do we hold people accountable how do we hold principals accountable? How do we hold our district administration accountable? That kind of thing. So it always comes down to who's ultimately accountable, and then what are the systems in place. I think it's systems and processes more than anything, because there's an incredible amount of autonomy in lacrosse, as an example, and just whatever, and that's wonderful in some ways, and in some ways it's not very tight. It's loose and tight, So.
Yeah, and I also think, like the engagement piece, if you think of educator effectiveness, and if your district is doing Danielson, that professionalism and being part of this work really links to that.
Yes.
And that could be where you have crucial conversations. In the meeting, I'm noticing you're kind of checked out. What can I do to, engage you better?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, actually, I had a staff member come up to me and say, even in the staff meetings, I thought it was better than normal because we've been really working on this, but she had a couple clinicals visiting, and they were like, oh, there's so much side chatter. I couldn't hear what the speaker was saying. And so, that's a norm that's a tough thing, because people have something you just have to say to their neighbor, or they have a connection or whatever. I happen to have a couple hearing impaired people in my building, and, they can't hear. So.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like it's those people who are checked out, but they're also the first people who know.
Yeah. She actually, this
No.
teacher suggested, why don't you just, when somebody's presenting, walk around or just use proximity like we do with kids?
Yeah.
Give them markers, hold on to this.
Here's a fidget.
I need you to hold on to this.
But that's a good point, even thinking about professional development. They say 12 minutes is even tops for adults.
Yeah.
And think about how many times you're somewhere and you sit for more than 12 minutes just listening. And then your mind's going to, oh, I've got to grade this. So when on my way home, I have to pick up this from the grocery store. So also thinking about that when you're doing PD, how can, through conversations or an activity, get people engaged.
Good point.
So readiness, back to the rubric. So readiness is it's a term that the National Implementation Science Group use, but really I struggle with that term because readiness occurs at the beginning and throughout. It should not just at the beginning of the year. You think about readiness and the pieces of readiness and the rubric, because you're going to find as you may think you're somewhere, and maybe as you're implementing it falls back, or maybe staff come and go and you have to rebuild readiness. So readiness occurs throughout the improvement process. So if we look at the rubric, which acronym city, sub-criteria rubric, the first piece is it's grounded in your mission and vision, and think about what Sandy shared today. It really has to be grounded in what your school believes. So, and it is a way to live out your mission and vision. So in our pretend school, I'm going to say that our school vision is every student is a success story. So as a new principal, most likely you will start at a school that already has a mission and vision statement. This self-assessment resource, it will walk you through the purpose of completing it, guiding questions, but then a self-assessment to lead your team through to see, is our mission and vision the right mission and vision? Are we all still on board with it, or do we need to revise? So that's just a resource that I connected there for you. And shared values or collective commitments. I think I saw you had commitments.
Agreements, I call them essential
Agreements, yeah.
agreements, but that's the IB language, so.
Yeah, are really important because they say when we do this work, this is how we're going to behave. So for our pretend school, I created some collective commitments actually that were from my prior building. So I didn't really create them, I just put them in there. But sometimes, because it takes time to do this and create this, sometimes you might say, I'm proposing these collective commitments so that people have an idea what you're even thinking about when you say collective commitments. I'm proposing these. Are there any that you don't agree with? And come to some type of consensus if you're going to take them off. Are there any that are missing? And that way there is voice in it, but you're not, doing the work of 4 staff meetings just trying to come up with your collective commitments. So can you all live with these collective commitments? If you want to take a moment to peek at them. I just looked down and went,
I guess I could see a staff member saying to me, well, this effective communication regarding student progress, is there a privacy issue there, or
We share that information.
So great. So the law says that if you have a legitimate reason to know how a student is doing, it may be shared. So
All students are our students.
that's where I was going with that.
Well,
Nikki.
Well, and this is the thing, everybody is like, well, or not everybody, we got some staff that are like, well, they really aren't our students because we don't have access to them.
And that's really a district decision. I worked in a district that did not give everybody access to all students, and I worked in a district that did. So it's really, as a principal, learning about that. Maybe even before you take the job, because maybe that's something you philosophically do not believe in. I struggled in the last district that did not. If you don't have day-to-day ongoing whatever with the students, you have no access to them, which really made it hard, like behavior-wise. You
Right.
know, I still had recess duty, I still had bus duty, and I didn't know, are they only be acting out when I'm there with them, or is this a
Students
normal
walk by
thing?
my classroom every day to get to the office, and I make them my students, but there are some that's like, I don't have access to their information, so I'm not going to respond or react to them.
Yeah, but we're
That's
fine
sad.
with
So you can't
see their
so, like,
information.
Are we
You
talking
mean-
specifically like students in special education or any, like just across the
Any
board?
student, if there's someone who's having a behavior or whatever.
And if it's in a different classroom other than your own?
Right. Yeah. Hallway.
That-
access, like just.
So you couldn't write a minor report on them for. a
You
behavior.
can, but there are
But you
staff
wouldn't
that
know any
avoid it.
resolution,
Oh, like you don't have like.
their background, or,
Right,
you know,
right.
what works for
Sorry, I
them.
was not following that.
Yeah. What works for them if they're having a meltdown,
Sure.
what doesn't work for them when they're having a meltdown.
I just
But
have,
even so, like if you had access to the data, would that tell you that?
Well, but
Possibly.
sharing out information, like if you see the student in the hall, here's what the action plan is, you know. We have some teachers that will not read that information because they don't feel that they should have access to
But
that.
that, I mean, not
Because
every,
that makes them
Yeah.
accountable.
and only certain kids are going to have action plans.
right, and if they do have an action plan, there is a need to know kind of thing, like, so there's like, because there's a lot of, like, we have BIPs for our high needs kids and the specialists in the classroom, you know, but only need to know. We're trying to be careful not to like make rather than everybody's business is everybody's business. But I just have to share, like, I had to have a teacher write a letter of recommendation for something I'm in right now. And she said, the thing that we know best about Sandy is all our kids are all our kids. And I could have just like, I was like, that was pretty awesome. And so, and that's,
And we really want to get to
Yeah.
that point.
exactly.
I really feel strongly about getting to that point where we are every child's.
Well, like,
Yeah.
I don't have access to hardly anybody, which there are pros and cons, but I can't help a kid with their locker combination because I can't even look them up in our system. I can't help a kid find their class. the
It's that
first 2
privacy
weeks.
versus, yep,
I
that's a
can't help
tricky
I
thing.
can't help a kid find their class because I don't know what their schedule is. I have to go bother main office for guidance. Like I don't need to know everybody's grades, but what if I have a student who's getting bullied repeatedly by this kid? I don't know what he or she looks like. What am I?
I also struggled, we had a lot of really medically fragile students. And to be out on the playground with them, I had one, the drop of a hat, she was so diabetic, and I had no access to her treatment plan.
Oh, yeah.
And if I wouldn't know it just from being in the school, if I was a substitute and she went on the ground,
Yeah.
I would have no idea why, because none of that was shared.
See, now medically, our nurse just says, you need to know this, and we will train, because we had a couple of kids with epilepsy, and she's like, everyone needs to know this. So she just took the bull by the horns and said, this is what you all have to be accountable and ready to go.
Our school psychs, at least in the schools that I'm in, do a really good job of making sure that everyone has access to like an at-a-glance IEP. So it has just the need to know.
That's nice. Yeah.
So like student strengths, student learning challenges, successful instructional strategies.
We have those, like, right.
And then it's got IEP
But it
foundations.
goes to the whole staff.
Yeah. that's
Everyone
what
has,
I like.
well, it's in a shared location. So if you want
Oh.
to get it, it's not like everyone
I
can
like that
just,
too, because I don't need like
Yeah.
I don't
No,
want,
I
I
don't
don't have
want
time
to
for all
understand.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm just
And-
like in the third grade classroom, like filling in, like I can at least like look at, okay, like I need to look for this kid and this kid could have a meltdown, so.
so it'll be like academics and then it'll have the provider and then it'll have the exact like frequency of the goals even that they're working on.
Because I think teachers might complain the other way too, like.
Oh,
I'm
can I
getting-
know
if I'm
all
getting
this?
K through 5 with like hundreds of kids in my building, I'm like,
Right.
what in the world am I even gonna do with this information?
Yeah, I like the shared drive idea. of that. Or businesses.
Okay, so collective commitments. Oh,
That
sorry.
starts at the, like the school psych at the meeting is filling in these it's not the case manager's responsibility to give that. I mean, that's a lot of
Yeah.
duty on the case manager. I'm sure you can contest to how much that would work that would be.
Oh, we do it.
Yeah.
Out of your school psych does it?
Does not. We are responsible for
Yeah.
sharing IEPs with the class.
Yeah, so our case managers.
In my last district, special education teachers were responsible for it too.
You know the student best. You know, probably better than the school site.
I mean, the actual typing up at the IEP meeting, the school psych and the organizational, the case manager will probably relay that out.
Okay, so going back to teams, so really thinking about within the school or district that you become a principal in, what is your linked team structure? A linked team structure is so important because of capacity and everything that is occurring. So thinking about if there are district teams and those district teams are working through continuous improvement, how is that information shared with the school level teams? And how are they linking their continuous improvement to it? So they're not trying to do their own on top of the district's improvement plans and meeting the district goals. And then same with teacher teams. And then it can even go down to the teacher level with the SLO. And I think Sandy shared a good example of that with hers. But really then the focus, the arrows are about communication. So then the teachers and the teacher teams can communicate to the school level teams what's working or what's not working so that decisions can be made. And same with the school level teams and can communicate up to the leadership team. So I heard a lot about communication and it's really setting up those structures so that the communication's going up and down both ways and it's two-way communication. So if this is another tool that I've linked in here and we're a bit behind, so I'm not gonna click on it, but it's really about examining team structures and functions and thinking about what is the focus of each team, what is the purpose of each team, what is within their sphere of influence, and that's really the function. What can they do, what can't they do, and who are the members? And the members, you'll notice that it's positions, not people. Thinking so that you have that diverse representation. So,
It's the members, not the people.
right. So you have a principal, a pupils,
Yeah.
yeah, you all have those people, but it's really the position so that you have diverse representation. And that also helps with the linked team structure because of the different folks at the district level that make decisions. Those pupil service support specialists may have, communicate more directly with the pupil services person or the special ed director, or whatever your district calls it. So, there really is, ongoing and multiple ways of communication. So if we think about the continuous improvement process and criteria and rubric, teams are so important that there are that number of pieces on the rubric that are related to it. And the numbers on the, I don't know if you saw that, these numbers are where they fall in the equitable multi-level system support through RTI. And I think it's on page 6 of the rubric.
Yep.
What each of those numbers mean. So being very thoughtful and making those connections. So now it's your turn to just do some thinking, because this may help you when you're working on your paper later. How will you ensure that you have diverse team membership? What will the role of families and communities be? How often do you propose to meet? What will be the purpose or focus, and what data will they use? So just maybe talk with an elbow partner for a couple of minutes.
So that one, the role of family communities, I think it is also.
Yeah.
Establish. And getting like a dimension together.
No, this is my bird bag. No, my bird bag. What are they doing right now?
Talking about how they'll map their team structure more.
Okay.
At the beginning, I would say we did
This was really nuts.
Yeah.
What does the rubric mean when it comes to
I wrote it so quickly.
That's
Okay.
funny.
Driving me nuts.
I was looking at it, I didn't even notice it.
So it wasn't
One
like
has
this team that are all of these, we then broke that team out into.
It's a help story that I to like, what is my role as a physical teacher thing, continuous improvement. I can see like where I fit into that like goal versus like, for me to look at like the whole thing, like, okay, so you wanna increase this, you know, your literacy, close the gap, like what can I specifically do?
Yeah,
And then what is my role?
yeah. And just being able to invest the time and energy into understanding that data, you know, and knowing what the interactions are, like you have 5 areas that you're working on, that's a lot of time and commitment versus if I just take a time,
Right. And one thing, and do that with it.
really well, and then you collaborate across teams
Yeah.
to share that information. Well, maybe that's maybe like the side of kind of team too, is like an area that's strong, you know, an area that needs improvement, maybe that's where you put your squeaky wheel
Right.
to really dig into that,
Mhm.
decide who's on that. Yeah. Piece of the
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you bet.
It'd be good. Yeah. Try to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, to be able to understand why.
Exactly.
Building the data, I think we just, we want your focus on.
Yeah, what are those goals are.
And then the control is rubric. I don't know why I'm so confused about this.
I think so, right?
I
Or like,
like
if you,
that.
I think
Is
if you
that
say
where
you're
you're-
like.
are you on it?
Oh, like.
Not this year.
So, have you been on it?
Yeah.
Where did your goals? Here's.
You know what, it's from like a lot of.
Team data things
So,
together.
yeah.
That's.
Your continuous improvement team.
Continuous improvement team.
Okay.
These are.
The
You were
goal.
doing the papers, you have.
No.
Okay. Right. Gotcha.
So you get the stakeholders, you know, to be,
I was like, I don't know.
Are you Title One?
Right.
We're not at Title One. We're school improvement.
And then according to the rubric,
Ours is like based
I
off of
don't know, of
our
course I don't know.
star
I just,
and like closing the gaps and like giving kids better flags, like when we're on the red and yellow, like up.
yeah, we always.
I know that,
But is that more like,
Ours are
those are like your.
School
those are-
SL.
Yeah. those
Yeah,
are
that's
goals
exactly
you
what
have
we have.
versus
Right.
like-
Yeah.
Long term.
Yeah. Because when I asked to see it, like,
Yeah,
well, like really have one.
that's
Yeah.
I didn't get like a cut, like I didn't get like a slideshow.
No,
Yeah,
no.
That's my extra one.
yeah.
Okay, about 30 seconds to wrap up your conversation.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh, the small. It was just so generic. It was so like, there's no way to measure it. There was like, these are just areas on. And then the special ed one was
Smart goals.
smart goals, because that's what you do with that, you know.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
IEPs. It's
Yep.
very measurable. You know, how, what tool you're gonna measure.
Okay, so which topic do you, how will you map your team structure and why? What did you talk about?
We talked about what like our main goal would be and then kind of developing, obviously diversity from that. Like there was like literacy was your goal, like making sure like Jessica said you have like a reading specialist on there.
Yeah.
Diverse population in your staff.
Anything that you guys talked about that you want to share about forming your team and why?
You just said about when you're involving other people, before you say, do you want to do this, find out when they will be, if they need be able to do it, like the time slots, if they're adequate. Or you get
That
the
may be
time.
something I know my teams used to work that out after the team. And, was determined when can we all meet on a monthly basis.
Well, we just, and earlier talked about if you were having it, I'm sure you just said this, because we were talking when we were talking. But make sure you pull from all facets of your staffs that representing all students. So like you have a sped teacher, you have the ELA teacher, potentially you have a member that's a music art PE.
Most definitely. And that's why that slide before that I said it's about positions to ensure you have the diverse representation and certain people on your team.
I think another thing is, are you willing to communicate this out if there's a communication plan out to your team? Because I know I've had some team leaders who then didn't want to be it anymore because they didn't want to be the median, if that's a requirement of it, you know, because they weren't comfortable sharing the information on the behalf of the team or vice versa, just for whatever reason.
All righty. So the next is the team has a system to process and use the data. So thinking about is if you're on a continuous improvement team or when you're leading, do you have access to data that you need so that you can actually be making those decisions? That's why I asked at the beginning, how many do you have access to WiseDash Secure or for districts, because there is so much data in there, and it's not, when WiseDash originally came out, it was more autopsy data, which was just your state testing data. But currently, WiseDash for districts pulls data nightly from every district in the state. So
It uploads it.
through the student information system. So it's not completely autopsy data anymore. So,
Can you show us what that looks like?
Yep, that kind of data. I'm like, oh.
yep, we're gonna go in there.
Is it like that? There's like a audio in there.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk about that, actually. Nannying devices are allowed now, so.
So just some tips, because when you're working on using data, confidentiality is really important, especially when you have that diverse team. So when you're bringing that team together, really thinking about the data, what they're seeing, even thinking about the devices that it is on. And that's why I scrubbed everything that you're going to see and made Cindy look it over last night, make sure that the school or the district name was nowhere to be found. on any of the information that I shared. So there is a DPI training module that you may want to look at before you become a principal, just to understand what personally identifiable information is and what are the rights around it. So you're asked to do a needs assessment. What does that mean to you? What is a needs assessment? So maybe stand up and meet with someone you haven't today and just move around the room and talk about that for a few minutes.
I know.
So you want just partners?
Needs assessment. Is that? It's an assessment of what you want.
We're gonna identify gaps. Without a needs assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. And it could be.
I think
Yeah.
right now I'm really looking at my
Yes.
score doesn't have score.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
It looks like you can keep your weight on it. Wow.
That it's causing you to send it back here because you do not. This side of me is hurting because it must be overcompensating.
Does Pat think you do extra?
No, he doesn't. But I almost have to be like hit by a car to even bruise. So I don't bruise easy at all. So I don't know what that means about me.
Probably good.
The old skin, I don't know.
I don't know, well, because I mean, bruising easily can be a sign of other problems, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Oh, sure, yeah.
So I make sure we gear up for like be a lot of smoke, be a lot of conversation.
And it gets great. Especially when it's so short.
Yes.
Yeah, it could be addressing,
We
equity, it could be.
I know pretty good for right now. Yeah. Definitely. It's very livable. But, no, we're plumbing works, we have electricity and heat.
The unfortunate thing is we don't have all the lessons for food and lunch. Yeah.
No. I used to do some.
Hey, about 30 seconds.
Some schools.
Yeah.
And we specifically.
April. No, I heard her talking. Hmm. We might take a break after this.
Yeah. She's little.
Well, how about the next time?
Yes, yes,
Activity?
very much.
That's really important to me.
Whoever needs to talk to them.
I was successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back together.
That's
That will be hard. If I sneeze, I'll get in trouble.
I'm with you.
You know, we're not gonna have to
Yeah,
ever, you know.
yeah.
So if you're looking for something, play like once a week.
Okay, so what is your definition of a needs assessment? What is a comprehensive needs assessment. If you were asked to do one, what are they asking you to do?
We didn't know for sure, but we thought it was just the biggest area, like in our schools where the gaps were, those achievement gaps, and what our biggest improvement needs to be focused on.
Okay.
Does it always have to be achievement based? Could it be just creating a trauma-informed school if you need that?
If your data shows, yes.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say too, like if it's a comprehensive, probably covers multiple areas.
I can, yes.
Trauma.
Any additions, Jordan?
Nope.
No? Okay, so really what we're going to do is go through,
Would it be the 10, well, you earlier laid out like equity, high quality instruction, would it cover all of those areas? Or you would at least have to say, here's where we're currently at within this area, here's where we'd like to go.
so we're gonna get there with the root cause analysis, so thank you. Good thought, because it does connect back to the equitable multi-level system of support. So a team that engages in a needs assessment looks at student outcome data and adult practices data. It's not just student data, and that's something that I in my role see often is they're only looking at students, and actually some of the needs assessments and root cause that I read that were turned in for schools that were identified actually blamed kids. It actually said because the kids come from bad homes, or we had one because the kids are Hispanic. I mean,
We'll write that down.
yeah,
And so that's a DEI.
yep. Unfortunately, they weren't accepted, and you know,
Yeah.
go back, we can't blame kids.
No.
So really looking at the adult practices, because the student data is reflective of what's happening in the classroom or within the school. So thinking about them together. So looking at both quantitative data that is interim and summative, thinking about qualitative data like perception surveys, looking at educator practice data that could be through the EE walkthroughs, or I know in my past district, we had, if you're implementing the literacy framework, these are the big buckets that we should see occurring in your classroom. If you are implementing mathematics, we should see these pieces in your classroom, and just doing instructional rounds and saying, yep, we see it, or no, we don't. So, and then a root cause analysis. We're going to go through a process today. Hopefully we'll get there, what a root cause analysis is. And then also thinking about going back to that linked team structure. We have this data and this root cause analysis. Is there something in the district already being implemented that will help us meet a root cause? And if there is, how can the school do something on their own that's kind of parallel with what the district is doing? So, and really focusing on assets that are brought to the team instead of thinking that gaps are deficits. And the team should be able to summarize the data that's collected and the results of the root cause analysis in an easy, understandable format, so that you walk up to anyone on the street, or when your parents are on your team, they understand what you're talking about.
So with like teacher collaboration, would that fall under educator practice data?
Mhm.
Or instructional strategies.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, but what data would you collect around teacher collaboration? We actually have a district looking at that right now, because implementing PLCs is their evidence-based improvement strategy, because it does fit tier 3 of the research. So
I'd be interested in that.
So a needs assessment actually has then the two parts. The part where you're investigating student data. So first will come question, investigate. That's actually digging in the data, clarifying the outcomes, and creating your hypothesis, which then goes into practices, which then you also investigate. You question first, then you investigate the data, you clarify what did the data say, and then you make a proposal. What will our action plan be? And that gets to the third part, which is action planning. Questions on that at all? So, and I guess I got ahead of myself. So all of those go into your action plan, and similar to we talked before, once you create that action plan, it should not be on your shelf and never looked at again for the rest of the year. That's what the Plan to Study Act cycle is all about. Usually, I will say in my past district, every 90 days, we came back together with data and said, okay, this is what we've implemented. Are we seeing changes in adult practice? Are we seeing changes in student outcomes? You know, if no to both of those, why not? So that we can create our next part of our action plan to address why there's that gap there. Questions on that?
No, but I just have a comment. The more people are involved in the improvement plan, obviously the more ownership they'll feel and the more they'll be invested in the plan. So
Yeah, and that's why I had, you know, every third Tuesday of the month, my entire staff was involved in the improvement plan portion.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let's say you do the three 90-day evaluation and you're not going where you need to go. Do you try to revamp what you're doing in the middle of the year? Like at Christmas time?
So it might not be that your evidence-based improvement strategy is wrong, might be that you started at the wrong place. You know, I think about just even, you know, my team and my building, we thought we had this rock star plan and we started to put it in place, and it was really evident that we skipped a whole part of that the rest of the staff needed so that we could implement it well. So we kind of stepped back and redid it. We also, because a big part of everything we did, beside the walkthrough data, was a lot of feedback from staff on professional development and what they needed, that we also used that to make adjustments to our plan. And it was obvious in that case that we went too fast and they weren't there yet from their feedback, so we made adjustments. So no, we didn't throw everything away. We just revised our action
So
steps.
did you revise that in November, December,
Actually, probably in October.
October? Okay.
Yeah, because
So
our,
maybe you didn't really get to the root cause.
well, no, we really did get to the root cause. It's just our action steps didn't match where the staff were for training and support to implement well.
Yeah.
So essentially, it's like a little mini action research,
All the time.
right, ongoing.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna get a definitive, it's just gonna say, hey, we know that this isn't, but this could be a potential, maybe we wanna try some targeting this.
Right. And you're going to see a change in adult practices before you will see changes in student outcomes. So you also have to think about that as you're implementing. Maybe your adult practices are going like this, but your student outcomes are staying like this. But once you get to that tipping point, all of a sudden student outcomes are going to scoot up. And that's why it takes 3 to 5 years to implement something well.
And staying committed to that is
Right.
with teacher turnover, with
Mm,
administration changes, and
most definitely. So in our pretend school, well, this is actually actual data from the school that we're looking. This is their demographic data, just to give you a little background. And I think I call them example school and all of the data that I scrubbed. So fairly typical size elementary school, a pretty large Hispanic population, large economically disadvantaged population, English learners, quite a few, is what stands out to me. Anything else? Anybody else?
Is that a typical number? Students with disabilities, about 14%?
The adult population is 12, right?
Yeah, so it's usually around 12.
Okay.
So, great question. Anything else, Sandra? So I have the sample schools, 17-18 report card, state report card, and 18-19 state report card. I also have their ASA accountability report. I have to be careful not to call it report card because it isn't a report card, it's a report. You may want to take a peek at that if you've never seen one before, just to have an understanding of what's reported. There is a crosswalk right above it, which will show you that there's a lot of overlap in the data. There might be just a little different way it's calculated, but there is an overlap in the data. For example, like the state report cards with the weighting because of economically disadvantaged, depending where the economic disadvantage is, growth is weighted, like because theirs is high, growth is weighted a lot higher than achievement. So something just to keep your eye on. So right now, I'm going to give you about 15 minutes. We're going to divide in two groups. There's paper there. And I want you to think about what are some bright spots on the report card and where are some areas of concern on the report card and the accountability report. Sound good? So if you'll divide into three, there's white paper on those two tables for you to do that work.
You guys are glued together there.
Okay.
They must be on the leadership team.
The accountability report, that's bottom, that last one. That says.
Yeah. You want to come back?
Sure.
Okay, so we're doing strengths. Positive, yeah. Yeah, she said stars or twinkles or something. The first thing I noticed is that our few attendance, right? Yeah, is right close to the state, so so they bring more attendance.
Been a huge growth between 17 and 18.
To exceed.
Matt.
Oh,
Yeah, I just looked at the overall score.
in 1 year. Yeah.
That tells me then.
So, in when the overall score, gotcha.
The sample, ESSA report at the bottom.
Yeah.
Says the name of the school. Oh, I don't know if you want to know that.
Yeah.
I only checked,
I don't know if
the
they
name.
have to check the name of that.
Well, no, I checked the.
It went from like
links
4
she
to
had
39,
on that one.
4 to 70. Well, that's school growth overall, not just ELA. ELA, is that right? ELA. Growth.
That's in the ESSA report, that bottom.
If you have questions on how to read into the report cards or the accountability report, just let me know.
Uh-oh. I'll scroll down so you can see it. Okay. Sorry.
I can see it, yeah, but that's what's linked. Sorry about that.
We'll keep it, I thought I cut it off.
It's public data anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it is on the ESSA website, so.
He's right here, he got it.
Okay.
I mean, everything. Yeah, I don't have it. Yeah. 1 year was 72. And the next year, it was 33.7. The graduation rate is not,
Elementary school.
oh, okay. That's interesting.
What is ELP program? Oh, yeah, English language. State, right, report card is based on the.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time.
How they're doing.
Yeah, so they went to Mexico. So they're virtual, yeah. But didn't necessarily increase it. For sure, there's that odd. You know, like a handful, let's, so they must be working hard at closing this. About the state average for. So maybe how much, so years, what more staff is where they're doing is. A lot more. Yeah, more credit, yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. On the ESSA report, the decline, remembering the white student group.
Yeah, that's quite small.
So anything. Yeah. You know.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't remember any
Yeah. And then the ESSA one too, it's individual, manage. So, so each year. So that would be the same with the state in its district report card, right? All the schools. So in 2015-16, they were first graders. Is it the same thing? Because the lowest 5%, you know what I'm saying? That they, you know, figure out the 5% of the schools are, and then that's their percentile rank. I'm looking at this.
2015, 16, they were at 61 were below, and then the following school year, 66 were below. So is this the same? So this shows little kids. Yeah, right? That's their person.
Yeah.
You would have one.
Oh.
But overall.
Oh,
yeah.
Because you would have, if it's PK 5, then you would have new PK and 5 going to 6.
Yeah.
It's more.
And then the next year, whether you like PK and
So those are, that's
They're breaking.
So I
Yes.
guess if your
those are
overall
the
numbers
individual
different,
breakdowns, so you can see where areas change
significantly.
that caused them to get identified because that CSI threshold that people always have for some performing schools is 6.4. And they were 5.2 the year before and 5.7. So the other screen then shows, when you look at the percent of girls, which ones are probably the most concerning. Can you explain the value added score? I love value added. Okay.
The complex formula,
But it's
made
to-
up for.
Yeah.
How do you explain that again? Like,
So value added is expecting all kids to grow, but understanding that if you started here and all students, let's say all students with disabilities started here, this is what their typical growth is. So typical growth, how do you frame it? And a 4 would be above typical growth. And actually a 2 would be semi-typical, but below where the typical where 1 or below is not. So it's taking into account students with disability, homeless, some economically disadvantaged, so by their group. What is typical growth?
Okay.
So
there's an added value.
As their weight.
Yeah.
They have to already
Higher
put
on
things
weight
are
growing.
higher on lower first.
Because they're above that 3 in growth across the board for ELA. So when you go up top and look at their growth there, because of their poverty, growth gets more points.
right.
So when you look at really their achievements, like below, their growth is quite high,
but they're not
getting down because they're growing.
it takes into account that.
Yeah.
You can't go from below basic
Right.
to proficient in 1 year. But if you're growing kids, at least they're going to be on a trajectory to get there. Okay, if you could finish up in about a minute and a half, but if you were the building principal, where is the greatest area of need and why? Say that again? If you're the principal of this school, what would you say is the greatest area of need and why? It's on the website. If I would have put this year's up there, that would have been on. Actually, there weren't CSI reports done this year. So.
We had the math and now the other one like legit.
I did look in all the data, but that one was linked. And I didn't look in the link.
I have to get going, but
Oh.
is there anything extra you guys want me to do to make up for this? Or go through this?
So
I wonder about that Zoom thing, if she should just read it.
recording it right now. So then you will be able to, like from this point on,
Oh,
watch the
awesome.
recording.
Oh,
And
great.
this will take us up to the end.
Oh, nice. Is that what you're doing later too? Oh, that's perfect.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay. I do just the 2 papers then by the.
Right,
by
February
the
7th. Yes.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, how about we report out? Greatest area of need for this school, and I'm sorry, I'm skipping to an area of need before talking about the bright lights or the successes, because I will say their success for me is that they are growing kids really well.
We talked about they still don't have a lot in like the proficient and advanced, that they grew from below basic, but still not a lot at those top tiers.
So, and I think that's why the growth score is so important for this school. They can really see the bright lights, because as I was mentioning over there, you can't go from below basic to proficient in 1 year.
Right.
But if you're growing at a
You're on that
larger rate, you are on a path to get more kids there. So I would agree.
ELA was something we talked about. They're definitely stronger in math growing. You can tell that must have been like a focus for them. They did grow in ELA, but there's still room for improvement.
And how would you guys, you agree with what they had said?
Safe travels.
Bye. So that's going to take us to our next adventure. And first I'm going to have you come up this way so I can show you. Some of you asked about Wise Dash for districts. I'm going to go into it real quick, but you might want to move forward so you can see it. So Wise Dash for districts, because it is student information and it is not redacted, is a secure sign-in portion on the DPI website. Within that, how you get access, each district has an application security manager. That person gives you rights to access Wise Dash for districts. There are 4 different levels of rights, from the highest level where you actually have like the economic analyst, where you can see poverty level data or homeless data, to just the least is just seeing the overall charts and not being able to drill down to the student level. So it really varies depending on what a district gives you. Usually if you're a principal, you have the highest level access for your building. Would you agree?
Yep.
So
Although in my building, my instructional coaches have the same level as I do, because they do so much with data analysis and things.
So in my prior district, Wise Dash for Districts has a paid for companion, which is Wise Dash Local. And that we gave all teachers access to. And that included state level data, not economic and analyst data, but state level data and local data like our F&P scores and those types, our STAR scores, our common math assessment. So it was just a way so that everybody had the data they needed. You're never supposed to tell it to remember your password, but I have so many passwords that I never can remember it. That's it being a stinker because
Yeah, I tried to log into it, I got that same thing.
I wonder if they have it.
Your card.
You mean you think that the
They may.
Wi-Fi is screening it maybe? Or it's on a secure website, I bet maybe.
Nope, I got it. So these are the applications that I have access to. I had more when I was in a district, but as a DPI employee, I had to go through all the security trainings to be able to have the access to what I have. So SAFE, I'm just going to show you really quick, is, and there's more applications than I can see in SAFE that I'm aware of, but so this is where, if you have access to it, this is where the ESSA and IDEA accountability reports are. ACP work keys reports are in there. High school growth, the joint federal identification packet, youth risk behavior, and then the resource and equity tool. The resource and equity data tool is a tool to help schools and districts because one of the requirements under ESSA is they look at resources and identify where inequities are and the use of those resources. And it comes down to more than just dollars. It's thinking about resources, people, family engagement, so there's 5 indicators that are part of that resource and equity tool. And it's based on research about what resources schools and districts should have.
We were told this year that we don't have to do the word keys anymore.
You probably don't,
The ACT.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that district wide or just
statewide.
or yeah?
Yeah, it's statewide. So, just let me go back. So, WISE grants, if you do any grants, right now federal and state grants are within WISE grants. That's where you do the application and the budgeting. Soon, all grants through the state will be in WISE grants. So, and it's just a nice tool that you can see everything in it all in one place. And WISE Dash for districts are the secure dashboards. So this is what you see when you click into WISE Dash for districts. Up here is kind of a toolbar, and these are some of the pieces that you can get into. I'm going to go into topics real quick. So you cannot see anything until you filter the data. And let's see, I'm just going to.
You can go to Northwoods if you want.
Well, I should, when I see topics, I should be getting a. This is what I should be getting. I should be able to select what I need, and I'm not getting it, and it might be because this is blown up. There we go. Do you see it across the top, the toolbars? So these are the topics. So assessment, graduation, growth, rosters, then there's just resources, attendance, dropouts, discipline, enrollment, and programs. So all that data is available. So the ones that are nightly pulled are attendance, dropouts, discipline, and enrollment. Those are pulled nightly. Under assessments, and there are, so under Carl Perkins, there are requirements around CTE that is also pulled nightly.
What goes in there for like discipline?
So that is,
Major ODRs are pulled up every night.
Okay.
Because that's why I'm really careful what I put in as a major because it becomes part of their permanent
It does,
record.
if you put it in the
Yeah,
intermediate,
minors don't, but
But majors. do.
well, or if it's in Skyward for us. So that's why we do our minors in a different reporting system.
We did EduClimber with that.
That's what we're going to go to. We do it in Swiss right now, but
Yeah, so a major in EduClimber would get.
Yep. And if there's what they did on a major is tracked based on what the, I think there's federal requirements around which ones are reported. For example, bringing a gun to school is a major that should be reported. But then also, are they removed from the classroom? And if they're removed from the classroom, how long? Is it an in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, expulsion? So,
Does this pull data from seeds?
no, I do not think so.
We were trying to figure out if a student leaves the room, and how do you like, you can't get them back in the room, so do you keep track of how much time that they chose to be out of the room and how, you know?
well, we do that with we have a refocus room. So every time they're out of the room, we track how long they're in the room in our refocus room data. So we have, yeah. And so then if we get to a tier 3 intervention, we have data about how long they were out of the room or in academic or behavior. It's not a perfect science, but pretty close. I mean, if they're right outside the door and the teacher's not getting anyone else to assist, then no. But if they're walking around the building, then yes.
So under assessments, there is a plethora of data. When you click on that, you can see that Access ACT, ACP statewide, because it collects just the kids who take the ACT outside of the statewide test and the statewide test. Still as a Badger, because that did happen. Forward, MAP, PAL, STAR, and WSAS is just Wisconsin Assessment System. So lots of data, and then under each of those, for example.
So then they pull data from all of those.
Yeah. And then under each of those, they pull it in different ways that can be then used. And then there's always resources to assist you in understanding what the data means.
Do they pull all those for the school report card, or do they still just use like forward or
This Wisconsin Forward is used for the,
nothing, no star?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's just where schools can opt to have STAR and MAP added. It's not a requirement to have them added. Like, for example, the sample school, I know that they use STAR, but because they use Wise-Local, it's not in here.
Okay.
So, yeah, so.
but that's where a needs assessment really comes in. I mean, it's helpful because you know what you're looking for, because otherwise the data is overwhelming. But if you know you're looking for ELA scores for, you know, for Latino students, you know, whatever, it really helps you with narrowing in on it. So the good news is there's data that you can hone in on whatever you have identified as possible things. The challenge for me in not being a data geek is that, you know, it's so much. You have to really go in knowing what you want to do.
Last summer we pulled data on discipline and assessments and kind of helped make that correlation between our discipline practices and our test results.
Mm-hmm.
And found
Cool.
some really good information. And
That's neat.
yeah, doing some professional development throughout the year because
Yeah. So that way you went in knowing what you were looking for.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
That's a great example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's usually more than one thing that impacts.
Yes.
You know, I feel like in one of my districts that I worked in, they focused on achievement separate from behavior.
Yeah.
But my struggle is always, are the students not achieving because of behavior?
Right.
Or are they acting out because they're lost in the academics? So I struggled with them being separate. So
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a little of both. I mean, you know,
Right.
Yeah.
so there's lots of resources
And then I think
there.
we also had that conversation about equity and looking at our discipline policies and procedures and revamping that.
so SK in our building is a perfect example of that, with academics getting in the way of behavior. Mhm.
So topics takes you to these. Advanced analysis allows you to do some different drill down where you can pull in whatever piece you want and it will give you the data on it. That's not in these dashboards. It's really kind of cool the way it works. So, and because I have access to everybody in the state, I don't want to break my confidentiality and show you that right now because their data wouldn't come up. Early warning are the early warning systems that are available in the state. And then snapshots is a great place for who's ever putting your data in your student information system. And when it goes to DPI, if there's any errors in the data, it shows up in snapshots so that they know, ooh, we need to go back and look at this. So it's kind of a quick, uh-oh, something's wrong with their data. So, questions on that at all?
The early warning for attendance is really simple to use, and I use that quite a bit because, yeah, because that's such a huge, we just know, obviously.
You know, I think in our last course too, Sarah was talking about how the data wasn't representative of one of the schools because of the way that the secretary was entering some information,
Mhm.
and that really had an impact,
Yes.
on a variety of things.
Right. We just had some training in our district about, cleanness of data and
Yeah.
uniformity of data. We discovered some things we were doing wrong about.
And entry and how you're marking it or.
For instance, there was a high school or a school dropout from Summit Elementary, you know. I mean, obviously it's a data error.
Yeah, right.
But that didn't impact your.
We,
Right.
yeah, we had, when we went to a new student information system, we had meetings together from across the district about anyone who took attendance in the system. What really is a tardy, what is really an absence, so that we had consistency, and that is so huge. And unfortunately, the student information system was on my shoulders too, so it was a lot of work. And when we moved to, we had Infinite Campus, and we moved to Infinite Campus. It's almost frightening when you don't know the program well. Something that you can do that'll funky things up. For example, the high school person who like did classes and graduation, kids that graduated at semester, she ended them instead of graduating them, which caused the graduation rate to that year. And it's just like, you know, we got the data and it's like, that's wrong. And it was because she undated them, which is like a dropout instead of graduating.
Kind of a celebration.
Yeah. So,
Like a
and
paper.
and if you know, now they have that catch in snapshots, but before they didn't have that. You didn't see it until your data showed up, and then you couldn't change it. So it's really nice with the snapshots now that you can catch it early.
So does that give you a big increase the next year?
Yeah, my prior district was always like 98%, and that caused it to go down to 94. So we went back to 98, but yeah, that was kind of a, oh my gosh. You know, so just understanding the student information system inside and out is important. So the data inquiry journal that I mentioned is within WISE Dash for Districts, and it's under the toolbar. And it's right here. Another thing that above, it says manage groups. You can create cohort groups. So let's say you want to follow your kids that were full academic year in kindergarten all the way through. You can create them as a cohort and just follow that group of students through and see, you know, especially if you have a high mobility rate, are those students on track, you know, to determine, you know, is maybe some of our scores because kids haven't been with us and we need to catch them up. You know, so it helps you kind of rule that out and then think, well, if we do need to catch them up, what do we do to catch them up? So, and we also used to track like our students who had interventions. We put them in a cohort group. So then we could say if they were successfully exited from an intervention, 3 years later, are they back in an intervention or not? So it's a great tool to use that way. So the data inquiry journal, and I'm just going to create one called as Journal of Sample School. I'm selecting equitable multi-level system of support. Here's a place where you could enter a description of it. Here's, you know, you could say school or whatever you wanted and enter your team members. But I'm not going to do that for sake of time right now. So now I'm just going to click on the journal. And this should look kind of familiar to the red ring, green ring that I shared with you before, that focus, question, investigate, clarify. Those steps are within there. So the needs assessment is really 2 parts. The first is looking at student data. The second part is looking at practice data and then putting them together and thinking about an evidence-based improvement strategy. We're going to go through the student part today. I'm going to talk you through the practice part, but there's no way we could get that all done today. Part 3 pulls in all the important pieces so you don't have to keep going back to part 1 and 2. Pulls in all the important pieces from part 1 and 2, and that's really where your action plan is, where the do, study, act cycles occur.
So the purpose of the data inquiry journal is just, if you want to look at data, it basically keeps track of what you're looking at and keeps a record of that.
So it allows you to do a needs assessment and create a continuous improvement plan.
Okay.
So you will notice the comment at the top talks about you should kind of have a starting point, and that's why I had you look at data first to say, what is our starting point? And it sounds like there was an agreement on ELA. Mm-hmm. So we are going to open up focus. And so what is the purpose of our data inquiry? And again, we're pretending we're the staff of this school. So why are we looking at ELA data? So we could just say, we noticed that, what about our ELA data? What did you notice when you looked at it?
Our scores were poor.
Scores.
What's that?
Students had lagging skills in ELA. And growth was not as high as we'd like.
So I know it's kind of small, but do you agree with that? Did you notice any student group that is struggling a little more than others?
Economically disadvantaged.
Students with disabilities.
I'm going to go to acronyms too, just for the
African American. Yeah.
It's so bad I didn't even realize I can't see that far away. There we go. So we stated our purpose. Our context, I think I heard literacy, so I can click that. This area for focus notes, as the team's talking about, coming up with this, you can take any notes that the team talks about. And the reason why that's important, as you bring it back to your entire staff, you can refresh your memory, or you can just share this with them, and because you can export the whole data inquiry journal and share, this is what we know. Not a required part of the data inquiry journal. So the next part of the data inquiry journal, I think I heard all students and gaps between student groups, because you named the others, the student groups. The next part is to form questions related to ELA that we are going to look through data to answer those questions. The benefit of that, they give focus, because like Sandy said, without something to give you focus, there's so much data in YStash, you could get lost. So if you focus on collecting data that answers your questions, you should not get lost. So throw out a question that could help us guide and look for data.
Look for data.
And ELA data around students.
What are their reading levels? Are they below?
Okay.
Would this be one, like, is there a correlation between attendance and ELA scores?
There you go.
Or also you could look at office referral data, is there a correlation between high?
What were the categories in the YSdash for districts at the top where you could pull data? There was discipline, attendance,
Engagement.
assessment.
Engagement. Is that what you mean?
Programs. And this might be enough for us right now, because we're really putting you on the spot, and we're supposed to be done in a half hour. And I'm a horrible typer. Okay. So usually this would take a little longer, but you really think about that data and what questions do you have. And also the questions are easier if it's a school that you're at.
Yeah.
You guys aren't at this school, so coming up with the questions are kind of artificial, and you don't have the background knowledge of really what occurs. So that is definitely understood. So the next part after you is to gather data for achievement data, engagement data. So achievement, we know what that is. Engagement would be attendance or behavioral data. And perception data, it could be a survey. So in going back to your PowerPoint that you have, there is additional data for class. And if you click on that, there's additional data for sample elementary. And you will see some data. So because we said ELA, we had a question about engagement. So hopefully I put work behavior and attendance in there. I only put discipline, sorry guys. So ELA, engagement, and then I made a student climate survey. If you click on the responses, granted there's only 5 responses, but pretend it's way more, that here's some pretend data around climate from students. So right now I want you to look at the data and think about what data pictures should we add to the data inquiry journal that answers those questions.
I just got the survey. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I could fill out the survey too.
If you go to responses, you can see it.
Oops. Well, that's the survey. This one?
Mm-hmm. You got the responses, all right?
No
No.
request evidence.
Yeah.
Student care perception. Back when
The student survey, if you want to just send me a request for access, I will send it to you because it appears it's only giving you the survey. And that could be because you have to put collaborators in up front. But this survey, I want to tell you, is a U.S. Department of Education survey that is research-based. So if you ever need a student survey, they also have a parallel parent one and a parallel staff one so that you can do kind of that cross look at all the surveys. So I want you to look at the ELA data, the engagement data, and survey data, and determine what pictures we should add to
Can
the
we see it
data.
on your thing?
If you request
know
access,
how
I
to
will
request
share it
access.
with
We
them.
can't request
Yeah, we
access,
can't.
we can just take the survey.
If you scroll down to the bottom, you might be able to see a request access.
I don't, I just get back on that.
Oh.
It's asking me to take it.
Your screen must have been touch screen.
I was like, yeah,
Sorry.
no, thank you.
Adjustment? Oh, I see.
Did you see it? Yeah.
It's on the third page. Resource unavailable.
It's been a long week. Why couldn't you see it?
I'm getting resource unavailable on the request.
Oh, really?
All right.
I could at least see what.
Yeah. huh.
Oh, here we go. Open. Oh, that's it. That's all I have in there. So if I go to student and parent.
there. I should say request.
Down here.
Oh, there it is.
It wasn't there last time.
No, you're right. It
Does it
wasn't.
allow you guys?
No, it says resource unavailable. But,
And because we're simulating this as a school, talk to each other. What are you noticing?
so,
That account.
I don't know why it's not carrying your name through.
I noticed that like the students with disciplinary removals decreased from 2016 to 2018 by like a lot. So I wonder if that had an impact on the scores or their growth rate went up.
Because they were present for learning.
They were
Yeah.
present, they were there.
Yep.
That's, I mean, they just had 25 out of school suspension.
And there was only 5 students with 3 or more. So that goes into that 25. 5 of those were repeat offenders. So days removed, yeah. 2016, 17, 156 days they were out of the classroom, and then by 2018, 19, only 58 days. I wonder what practices they've changed for that to go down. Teaching practice.
Yeah, and if you were actually at the school, you'd probably
You would know.
know that, you know. And that's where this is kind of hard, but it's also good
Yeah.
to look at data and just kind of pretend.
Oh, wow. Students do not feel they're all treated
Yeah.
the same.
You picked that up. Yeah, I noticed that too.
Boys and girls treated equally.
There's some real climate problems in your school there.
Again, I made it up.
I know.
I made it up.
I know.
Well, there must be a good adult who's working with them being respectful.
And then no in-school suspension that last school year. It'd be interesting, yeah, if you knew the school, you'd obviously know a lot more, but like, what do they consider an in-school suspension? You know, some people mark that, like, I'm thinking about students with disabilities, like, you know, there's many times where like, no, you just need to stay in the special ed classroom the rest of the day, you can't go back out, would they count that as an in-school suspension or not?
We don't if it's part of their IEP plan, yeah. I mean, so occasionally I suspend an out-of-school suspension, a special needs student, you know, but that has to come through me. That's how I know about it. You know?
Yeah, because that's what they were doing prior to when Amber and I came to Sparta, and that was one of the big things that we looked at. Were you calling this an in-school suspension?
Right.
Why are you doing that?
I already forgot what we were supposed to be looking for.
Can you give me access to school surveys? When I hit request access or edit, I get resource unavailable.
Really?
Yeah.
Me too.
Now, once I got permission, I got the questions, but at the top, there's a tab for questions and then a tab for responses.
Yeah.
So you can click on responses. Once you get it.
Yeah, I still can't look at you.
You can't be anything.
Isn't technology wonderful?
That sends the actual survey form.
Then you have to look at the analyzed results, you know, responses.
Yeah, see, when you get to, see, I have the survey questions come up again, but next to that tab, there's responses now. Yep. If once you get this, click on responses, then you can see the pie graphs.
Yeah, But other than the survey and the discipline data, the other data that you have in there is
It's actually,
like academic.
actually they're discipline data.
There it is, okay.
Mm.
So what did you make up?
The survey.
The survey, okay. Because now you can see here too that like that economically disadvantaged students, there's no growth. in their or DLM.
No, it's
No.
not.
No, it wouldn't.
That's very interesting.
Right? Yeah. There's a lot of growth on the report card.
Because they're Wisconsin forward.
Because it's given the value added growth.
Yeah.
So it's
Yes.
students with disabilities, what's the average?
What was the economic?
The average student with a scale score, what's their average growth? That's why it probably shows that way, because it's not value added.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
I wonder why they would think that like their teacher wouldn't notice if they were gone at school. Adults at school.
Again, that's all fake data that I just went through.
Okay.
And
I was like, oh, I wonder what like that tells me about the day. My bad.
so I'm just going to show you something really quick. So all the reports are pulled out of Wisestash, but if I was live in the school, I would just be clicking like the growth report that you just mentioned. I would just click it and add it to the image gallery. And then I can select where I want it to go within the image gallery. But because I don't want to actually go in the school,
What do you mean to select where you want it to go?
I can.
In your inquiry journal, you mean?
Yeah, I can select if I want the data to go in achievement
sure.
data, engagement data, or perception data.
That's pretty cool.
And you can also, I just threw a picture on the desktop. Excuse me. You can also, because if you have EduClimber and you have pictures, you can also upload those pictures by hitting that upload and then just selecting the picture and open, and it's there within that. So it puts your data in one place so that, again, as you share and come back, you can understand where the data is. If you noticed, I put trend data. Trend data is so important because looking at 1 year's worth of data could really cause a team to go in the wrong direction. So always, and they say trends are 3 years or more. So looking at over time is very important. Is there any other data that really stood out to you that I should make sure that? I heard someone say ECD.
Yeah. I think I was reading those charts wrong because is one of the charts in there the statewide data,
Yes.
and then the second one is specific to that school.
Just for, so that there's a comparison.
Yeah, that's where I saw like there was no growth. I was looking at the statewide one.
Oh,
State stays the same, probably, yeah. So then this inquiry journal, though, only that you would have access to this if you had access to WiseDash, but you could print it for people and share it with your team, right? Because it would all be for something.
so right now it is a single owner,
Mhm.
but in May it will have share rights.
Ah, that was my question. Cool.
Did you have the ECDs, good girl?
Mm-hmm. I did. Yeah, I was just gonna the statewide one.
Any behavior type data? I'm just throwing a couple charts in here so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll move on. Any behavior data
They were talking about suspensions, right?
Yeah,
that stood out?
yeah, it was like the number of disciplines as that referrals or suspensions went down, the ELA grades went up. Yeah.
Well, then like when, I think it was like only 5 kids, like, it wasn't like the amount of kids going down.
Only 5 kids made up almost all of the.
All the suspension.
Yeah, and like that one too. Each year, the number of out-of-school suspension decreases, and each year the ELA scores increase, showing that maybe the more they're there in class.
So being in class makes a difference.
Well, or even that you've got positive behavior and support systems in place
Yeah.
that is causing them to be engaged, that's causing their learning to be.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more likely because 5 days wouldn't make a big difference, but
Oh, but look at that from 156 to
Right.
58 and relatively.
I have to tell you, that kind of makes me think they're, I don't know, underreporting, because that's a big shift, but anyway.
They made some changes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they weren't reporting right.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm saying. I was wondering how they were.
They were
documenting
too much, yeah,
that.
that's true.
Mhm. That if you weren't in the classroom, that was considered an in-school suspension, but maybe you were over in the special ed classroom
Right.
or something, I don't know. And they were documenting, that's kind of what we found. Is
Yeah.
The way they were.
Well, we were over-reporting minors actually too, so, I mean,
Mhm.
we had a lot of training on that. What's the purpose of it, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
But you can see how if you engage a team in this process, how much ownership they would have in it
Yeah.
and digging in and, oh, why? And then, you could develop that natural curiosity. And then once you come up with something to fix it,
Yeah.
you get a lot of ownership.
Okay, and same with perception data, you would do the same thing. Then the second part, after you've investigated your data, then data findings. What are some things that are really popping up or that you're noticing? Like I would say their achievement is kind of flat because over the 4-year trend, yes, it went up this last year, but it's kind of flat, where I think their growth has grown, or
Mhm.
and then you would say, is it a celebration or a concern? Because if you remember at the beginning, I said, think about asset thinking. And that's over 3 or more, so I think that's a pretty high priority, and then you just hit save. Yell. Growth. Increasing. I would say that's a celebration. And we're seeing it over 3 years. I would still say it's a high priority because you still want kids to grow. Then if we talk about discipline, what would you say a discipline finding is?
The ODRs are decreasing, right?
Yeah.
And it's a celebration.
This is so far away, I think I'm blind. High, medium, or low priority?
I think it'd be high.
I mean, I guess it depends on your vision.
I
I'm
think
wondering if it's medium. It seems to be going in the right direction. It's still a priority because it's still not zero. Everything can't be high, otherwise it would be crazy. So with your data team, you would come up with some findings that support answers to your questions. And then again, you would then, based on the findings, and you would create a student outcome priority statement. And that's really, and there's a great example that if any of these information buttons give you like samples of what a student outcome priority statement would be, and really what is our student outcome priority in ELA. And it's to continue the growth at an accelerated rate so that our students are proficient, correct? So I'm not going to fill that in because I'm looking at time also. So then based on that, then you come up with a hypothesis of practice. And that puts together the student outcome priority statement and what do we think? What practice, is related to it. And then
Jordan had a question.
Yeah, I'm not like shaking in my boots right now, but like, how much play in the system do you get as a new principal? Like, you get a new job, do you get PD on this?
so you can go to CISA.
Well, but it depends on in a big district. In a big district, I would work with my instructional coach, so.
Yeah, it depends what this district does, if they use the data inquiry journal or not. But I will say using the data inquiry journal matches a research-based continuous improvement process without because it really shines a light on an area.
In La
of
Crosse,
need.
it can be more informal, frankly. I mean, we don't require this. This has been a wonderful thing for me to know and, understand, but it's not a requirement right now. And so again, working like with the instructional coach, that's really been or literacy specialist at the high school is really a good way to do it because they have been extensive training and then that's one of the things to work with you. But you can go to CISA or whatever, yeah.
So then here is where you can, so with the hypothesis of practice, there's like a fishbone activity, which the team will brainstorm, why do we have this problem in our school or a district? And then they just brainstorm ideas. And then through the influencer activity, they prioritize what is the greatest or the root cause to what we're doing. Sometimes there might be two, and I've seen schools and districts when they've when they've done this work, they have selected two, but actually the two are so very related that they're easy to put in a root cause statement together.
So like ELA could be not teaching to the I can statements to fidelity and not getting formative assessments to find out where, I mean, you are and closing gaps as you go along. But to me, a lot of times it's universal instruction. You don't have fidelity to the universal instruction until the kids don't know what they're supposed to know and be able to. Teachers aren't clear on that. So it's, or you're below grade level on your expectations or.
Or the universal instruction isn't really aligned to the standard.
Or there's no accountability for teachers to do that, like.
You don't have to see
You know, so I mean, those are common things that I have seen, or it's not aligned and our practices aren't culturally responsive is, you know, especially when I'm thinking about this school being, you know, so highly Hispanic, you know, maybe their resources aren't culturally aligned. I think of my work with another school district that almost all their students are African American, but most of their teachers are white. So, you know.
But that's a hard one to fix in a, yeah, I mean, that one, you know.
The whole state.
Yeah.
These schools are 98% African American.
Yeah, not that one.
One thing that in terms of culturally responsive practice, I really agree with that, like the direct instruction for a whole group is probably not culturally responsive for many of our groups. So more of a mini lesson with a menus approach. You know, and I had one teacher, like I actually had to require that because it's just not her strategy, and kids were just not growing in that room at all year after year. So just really requiring that.
I think that's accountability piece too, because we've been switching to that, but I know that there's still some classrooms that aren't following that workshop. So then
Right.
just like that.
So in our district, for the first time now, I can assign a coach. I mean, teachers are used to just say, I want a coach, and this teacher refused a coach for a long time. And then now our practices is that I said, no, I can assign. I know you don't want to, but I really want to give you the support.
Did you help design this program?
Yes. We first, the rubric was created based on research, and this was created after.
So you took a shift from paper to digital?
So they are online. And they do meet all the requirements under SNI.
So if you get identified and you use this, you're good. but I say, as a principal, you would develop trust from your staff if you really understand data on continuous improvement. I mean, what a great way to show your staff that you're not just flying by the seat, you know, that you are really.
Yeah, and something I also noticed in the plans that are submitted, not only do they not come back to them, they don't have a measure to say, is this effective? Are practices changing in the classroom? Do they have a walkthrough tool or instructional rounds? How do they have, because ongoing professional learning is so important, and ongoing professional learning isn't the one time going to a conference and thinking that you're going to get it. Research says on one topic alone, someone needs ongoing professional learning, like a workshop for 14 hours at minimum, but it's more like 40 on one topic, and they need ongoing coaching and support on that topic. So putting, you know, thinking about your action plan, whatever you select as your evidence-based improvement strategy, how are you going to support professional learning so that the professional learning is based on research that, you know, like right now I really struggle with one of my districts because they selected professional learning as their evidence-based improvement strategy, which there's a lot of research that shows it can make a difference. But if you're doing professional learning on the right thing, and what they're selecting to do professional learning on is acronym soup. I mean, you know, they're practices, but they're not high leverage practices that are going to bring about long-term instructional change or change in the kids. So I'm having this inner battle going when they don't exit identification status. They're going to say, but we implemented an evidence-based improvement strategy. But in my mind, you know, so even at DPI, because we truly believe in local control, we don't say, But those strategies, you might think about it in the back of your mind, but you know.
You really can't like tell them.
So when I attended the impactful coaching for ASA, the really strong message from the ASA presenter, Tammy, whatever, was that principals are not doing a good enough job of holding people accountable. They're afraid to have those crucial conversations. They're not using the evaluation system with educator effectiveness to the way it should be. They're not holding people accountable, that things have to change, that we're kind of a state of crisis, and that was the message. It's up to principals, and gone are the days when you can just keep telling everybody what a great job they're doing. Yeah, and so it was pretty powerful as she really challenged us, and I really agree with what she's saying, and frankly many principals, that's the way they do coach. And if you don't, then you kind of you hold people accountable. Some people really value and like that, but some people are like, well, maybe this isn't the building for me because I really I don't fit. Yeah.
Well, obviously, like technology, the amount of we can view of data now is crazy. Like thinking back to your experience as principal, when was there like a definitive like, oh my God, there's a paradigm shift now from just like, we think this stuff is working to, okay, now we can actually measure it and figure out what is it impacting.
Probably throughout my whole career, there's been that way, but different districts have come on board at different levels. And I have to say, like I came from Holman, which was very database. And when I came to La Crosse in 2000, it wasn't database. It's become more database, but La Crosse kind of has a culture of not being database, being more strategies based and relationship based. And I'm sure that's not a surprise to you. So it sort of depends on what district you've been in their paradigm. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, we've always had data, but it's not been at our fingertips.
We're really heavily.
Yes, you guys are.
Really.
And Holman too. Right, but La Crosse, we got a way to go. EduClimber is a good step, having it easily accessible, those kinds of things.
I'm just like thinking to like photocopy stuff and passing it out and to get teams.
Well, there wasn't as much, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember doing data retreats where
Papers.
we would take cutouts from the WKC and paste them to a sheet, and I would walk around with chart paper and go into meetings when we have our data digs or our monthly get-togethers and repost everything along the wall, and it's
La Crosse used to give us we had a data retreats too, and we'd have a data notebook, and then we'd come up with an improvement plan just based on all this data in this big 3-ring notebook.
Well, I wonder too, like, over the years where you do have access to more data and the focus is to be more decision-based, right? I mean, I didn't know that from when I first started teaching in 2005, that, where was I going with this? I wonder if that had somewhat to do with Act 125. Granted, I think that that's a whole other conversation, but just being able to make decisions, quantify our practices a little bit more because there's more data to look at to be able to put a qualifier to it.
And that's why I feel like with this process, there is so much more data. I think about, when I was in Holman, we had an access database, and my secretary it didn't put anything into pretty charts, so then she would go into pretty charts, and we're human, mistakes would happen, and you would create an action plan, and then you look at the data and go, this is why that popped up. So I think data's always kind of been there, at least in my career, but I think we're getting more strategic about how we use it.
And just in time data, like more live data.
Yeah.
So that's a huge one. Every 90 days to review, we couldn't have done that we could get it once a year. But now being able to review maps and STAR and office referral data and engagement data, attendance data.
That data to teach performance.
Yeah.
And then going back to those crucial conversations that you have to have with teachers, and gone are the days that I get to just do my own thing.
And that's really hard.
Yeah, that's really hard.
I will tell you, it was a lot of crucial conversations, and that book, Crucial Conversations, I wore it out because it was like, I even have it on my iPad, still do, because it's like, I know this is in here somewhere because it's hard.
It's vulnerable too. Even like on my own PLC team, you know, like when we're all sharing like our CFA data, my kids love it, you know, and it's like taking that like ownership of that and like wanting to seek out that growth and like asking your colleagues, like, what did you do to hit this target standard that like I somehow missed? Like that takes a lot of trust and strong PLCs to like get to that.
Good point.
So,
Very good
you know,
point.
and that's an important piece to remember as an administrator.
Yeah.
Because teaching is a very personal profession. And I believe every teacher is in it for the right reason.
They care.
And they care. They didn't wake up in the morning and say, I'm gonna suck this year.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't care what my kids do today.
They don't say that. They're doing their best. So always assuming positive intentions. And as an administrator, if you're seeing someone who's struggling, support,
Yeah.
you know, and do it in a supportive way that they don't feel like they're being targeted. And that's really.
And privately,
line.
privately is super important, I think. I think that's huge. So I'll open up those links to mine, and so you can see some of those crucial
Yeah.
conversations, or that one crucial and then the crisis one.
But otherwise, get those crucial conversations. The beginning of it's so good because it has you take a test and it lets you know when those types of conversations are, what is your tendency of your personality to do? And then throughout the book, then it talks about, so if you're an avoider, this is how you should handle the conversation, you know, so it's.
Maybe us are in this profession because we're people pleasers, right? So we tend to go on the avoider part because we don't, and maybe that's not you, but for a lot of us, you know, we, yeah. So that's why I went to
And
the
then there's
coaching
the
to try
opposite end, the
to,
bull in
or
the
training.
China.
Yeah, to get better.
Then there's the opposite, and I forgot what they call it. It's like the bull in the china shop who just doesn't take into account
Yeah.
person's feelings and just boom.
That's true.
That's my husband.
So go back to this. So
You fix it with the
I'm
band-aid or
looking
a
at the
sledgehammer.
time so that we can be done in 20 minutes as we promised. So using the fishbone guide and the influencer activity to prioritize your greatest root cause. So really getting down to it, because once you've identified what your root cause is, and it's really a root cause that you think about it as a problem of practice, but within here, oh gosh, I forgot what they called it. Practice priority statement, again, asset-based language, but in other continuous improvement processes, it's called the problem of practice. So thinking of that, you know, whatever you come up with your root cause, what is our problem of practice that is influencing this root cause? So what are we doing? And then part 2 then goes to, I'm just going to skip real quick, the practices inquiry, which, as I said, will bring, if we would have filled these parts up, they would have been there. Otherwise, they will have you go back and edit incomplete if you would like. So here's where you name the evidence-based improvement strategy. So that is very specific. What are we going to do?
And that's what you said, not to do with like the professional development.
Right, it's professional development is how you're gonna ensure that evidence-based
So this would be
improvement.
like a workshop implementing like.
Yeah,
mini
so,
lessons. Okay.
so, yeah, one of our, actually, the district you're looking at, the schools selected to implement readers and writers workshop.
Okay.
And there was research that made it a tier 3 evidence-based improvement strategy. So their evidence-based improvement strategy is implementing reading and writing workshop. Below then is where they can put, you know, what's the research say about it. And then these questions, these questions are based on our friends from NERN, but it really gets to that readiness piece around implementation science. And if you click on it, there's something called the hexagon tool that goes more into detail, but it helps teams think about, so is there evidence that this is an effective practice? And, thinking about not only is there evidence that it's effective, but is it effective in schools, like our context, like our student groups or the population? Then the next piece gets to program supports. Do we have supports available so that the training, coaching, and such can occur to implement this well? And there's a place to do that. Usability, thinking about our context, how usable is, and thinking of readers and writers workshop, how usable is it in our school? I know when I was in Pullman, we looked at, because we did reading and writing workshop for our K-5, and it was very successful, that our middle school was looking at it, and there are resources for the middle school to use it, but usability, their school day really didn't match what's required for readers and writers workshop. So is it really usable with fidelity? So having those conversations. Does what we are implementing, does the practice meet the need that we've identified in the needs assessment, and how? Does it fit? And then capacity with everything on everybody's plates. Do we have the capacity to implement it well? And that's where sometimes you may want to pull out a different tool and do an initiative inventory to say, these are all the initiatives. And I once did an initiative inventory with my leadership team, but then had teachers do in the building do an initiative inventory, and they had way more initiatives. So that really speaks to the push and pull and how busy people's plates are. So really thinking about if they believe all this needs to be done, what can we take off the plate? And we really looked at data. Do we have data that says implementing this has made a difference? If it hasn't, maybe we can let that go. What do you think? So having those conversations so that we can implement it. And so the next two pieces come to what does the instructional practice look like when implemented with fidelity? So again, thinking about, let's take reading workshop, is the classroom environment set up to support teaching reading workshop, including having the texts and everything, the varied texts in classroom libraries. Is the teaching point, is it stated, or do the kids, are they actively engaged? Just thinking about the workshop model and those pieces, but then also thinking about the leadership practices. What does the leader need to do to implement those well? Because those are the pieces where it says evidence. Those are the pieces that you probably will want to create kind of a walkthrough tool to ensure that, they're the necessary practices. Then any question, just the question portion around, so we've talked about what the instructional practice is, the leadership practices, what questions do we have? And then going to investigate and clarify. Do we have any data right now around those questions? If it is a brand new practice, you may not have data at this time around, that practice. You may have some data, maybe you want to go around and just check classroom environments if you're starting workshop to say, okay, if these are the important things in classroom environment, what do we need to do to ensure that the classroom environments are set up for success? And then the last part is just going into create your improvement plan. So again, it brings in your needs assessments from part 1 and part 2. The plan foundation just goes into how will it be communicated, when will we come back and reevaluate our plan with data, so it's planning ahead of time, who are our team members on it. The improvement strategy plan is really a theory of action. If we do this, then this, and that helps you get to kind of short-term, long-term goals. And then your actual action plan, which gets into who's going to do what, when, and what resources are needed, and how you'll measure the effectiveness of each step. Sustainability, even though it is a separate tab on its own, you should be planning for sustainability throughout. It's kind of like readiness. You plan throughout and come back to it. Questions on that at all?
So this is what they should write their paper on then.
So if we, let's go to, do I have the agenda open? So I've shared the state resources. Sandy shared her resource. You probably have a house continuous improvement done in your district. So I want you, the question is, how does a principal implement a comprehensive continuous improvement framework effectively to maximize student learning? Now, when it says maximize student learning, know that the brain cannot be separated from that. So always remember that, because so many people feel like, oh, every continuous improvement, always about student learning. Well, all learning goes through the amygdala, and if there's, traumatic something going on in their world, that learning's not going through. So really, when I say student learning, I mean continuous improvement, just to maximize the whole child. So in your response, again, think about the rubric. What did you know, or what have you learned? And think about the resources that have been shared today and your own experience. If you want to interview your own principal, that might be a great place to start, to even talk about your district's continuous improvement process if you're not on the team. And so the first part is, what do you know about research-based continuous improvement? Why is it important to know this as a principal? What will you do as a principal? So thinking back to the continuous improvement rubric, where I even had you think about your teams and your meetings and such. Those are all important things to think about. And the last part is just that grammar and such. Questions on that at all? So that paper is due by the 7th, and that's why we're getting out early, to give you time to write that paper. So I'm going to go to next time. The reading assignments are also on there, and it's just out of this book for this next time. Papers are due the 7th. Work, there will be activity posted in Moodle on the 12th. We need to work out what next time is going to look like, being that the class is, we learned this morning that you guys are double booked. And we had a great class plan for you, so we're trying to
drop back 10 punt.
Yeah, to figure out how we can give you the rich experiences on the 2 essential questions in a half a day. Or, we do have a guest speaker next time also, a colleague of mine from DPI. She's absolutely amazing and a little firecracker, so I think you will enjoy hearing from her about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So hopefully we stay in the morning, otherwise I may have to have her recorded.
Okay. So our goal was to give you specific examples from the building level and examples in learning and best practices, so that you can actually experience it and walk through some examples. We do want your feedback. If there's things that worked well for your learning style, things that did not work well for your learning style, please let us know either now or in an email, because we want to tailor this class to your learning as definitely. And if you have questions that we can help with, again, same thing, please share now or email either one of us or both of us. And then we don't probably want to take the time to share out, but really reflect on something that you've learned today. I know I've even taken myself a couple notes on my cell phone about things that I'm going to, I'm going to do that, a little differently, that you'll continue to research or have conversations about back in your building based on what we talked about today, or as you reflect in your journal about what you're going to do when you become a principal, either one. So, because you can be a leader wherever you are, and the things that you're learning here will apply to absolutely any role.
Any questions on anything from today before you leave? I want to make sure if you have any questions that they're answered.
I think I just have to digest it all. I feel like this was a lot of
Yeah.
Just, I guess reflect on how am I going to put this into my own practice?
I have a lot of things in my notes too, things that I want to look at a little bit deeper and just to be able to grasp a little better.
As you're digging in deeper, if questions come up, or an email away or a phone call away. So.
Okay.
Or a text message. I guess our phone numbers. My work number won't take a text message.
Well, my cell phone definitely does, yeah. All right.
I just remember a super long document that I was in on, and I think it was the improvement plan, like it was like just paper after paper of questions and questions, and I'm just wondering, this is probably 10 years ago, what we were doing that for. I can't remember what we were doing it for, but it was a lot of work.
Continuous improvement is a lot of work, and that is why earlier I said what we focused on our building was related to our 3 goals. I had to say no to a lot of outside sources that are like, could we do this? Sounds wonderful, but too busy.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the focus.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Because
Do you want me to turn off the recording?
I think I can record it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Don't forget your food.
Maybe the projector.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
One second.
I don't know why these buttons don't work.
So, and both papers are due to submit.
Yes, both papers. So you
It should be a
should
skateboard. Oh, I'm still a skateboarder.
Email them.
email them.
You're gonna mail it there?
Mhm.
Thank you.
And that's a good advantage where that I
Last
don't
class, and that was
fall.
very well.
Through Moodle.
Yeah, it's not a very friendly 100 pages.
Well, there are some great improvements to it over the many years.
Teaching for the Viterbo.
Yeah, first said Blackboard, that one was Moodle. Better than Blackboard, but it's not. So we will email you once we know the details about next class too. So.
That's weird, they didn't have anything. Or try to change it. Like either end.
Yeah, did not know anything about
Yeah.
it.
Heard Susie's pretty
Hot.
schedule driven.
Oh, shoot. I thought you meant like hot, like upset about the whole
Oh,
thing.
she mad about that too?
I think she was a little,
And Susie is your research person?
yeah.
Yeah. Probably not willing to.
Not very flexible?
No, I don't think so.
Yes, thank you. I would grab that. Thank you.
That's okay. I brought my power cord and no computer today.
I just have my extension cord with my sewing machine when I go places. But I don't have a computer.
Yeah.